If we take a slightly longer view, it's clear that narratives in Britain around Gen Z's attitudes to spending and saving are different than those we saw about the millennials a decade or so ago. Today, Gen Z are entering the workplace in the face of an economic slowdown too. Many had their early careers and education interrupted by lockdowns and disruptions associated with COVID-19. And it seems possibly even less likely that Gen Z will get a hand on the housing ladder. And yet we hear very different stories. Gen Z are expert savers already building a nest egg and will support them through their retirement. Can attitudes and outcomes between two similarly aged cohorts really be this different? Ipsos has examined its financial research survey study to understand how far these images are borne out by the facts. Recently, we asked the UK public which generation they felt had been most negatively affected by the rising cost of living. The most commonly chosen generation wasn't the oldest pre-war or baby boomer cohorts, whose retirement incomes are fixed, but was in fact the millennials. A quarter said that millennial generation had been most negatively affected, far ahead of Gen Z and the pre-war generations who came second. Millennials may well be more exposed. Many have young families and may also be caring for elder parents. But the same is likely true of many in Gen X, and they were less likely to be identified as an especially affected generation. This reputation is confirmed further when we look at longer-term data too. One question in the British Social Attitudes Survey, a leading social survey that has run since 1983, asked participants to define themselves as either low, middle, or high income. Over the life of the survey, we see that younger generations are unsurprisingly the most likely to consider themselves as low income. And this proportion falls over time as they find jobs, get promoted, and build their careers. But the proportion of each generation who feels this way has varied between cohorts. In 2019, when Gen Z were aged 23 and under, 53% of them saw themselves as low income. Yet if we look back to 2008, when millennials first appear in the data series at age 28 and below, they are a full 10 percentage points more likely to identify themselves as low income, despite having 5 extra years on our Gen Z comparison point. This tells us that millennials' self-image was also more negative about their income and prospects than Gen Z at a similar age. We can also look further back still to Gen X. In 1991, when this generation was 28 and under, 51% saw themselves as low income. This third data point suggests that the millennial experience is unique. They were more likely to see themselves as low income compared with 2 other recent generations. There is also evidence to support the headlines we see on Gen Z's saving mentality. Data from our FRS study has recorded attitudes to saving over the past 20 years. One of the questions asks whether people only save for a specific purpose, which we can read as saving in order to spend rather than saving for a rainy day or emergency fund. In early 2020, we found that 44% of Gen Z agreed with this more spendthrift sentiment. If we look back to millennials in 2005, when they were the same age as Gen Z in 2020, 57% agreed. And although generations move away from this perspective as they age, if we look again at early 2020, we find that millennials were just as likely as Gen Z to agree. Despite their greater age, 44% of both generations agreed. There are also behavioural signals. Gen Z are more likely to have savings than millennials at a similar age too. In 2019, 48% of Gen Z told us that they had some level of savings, lower than other generations, but not too far behind the UK average of 54%. If we go back to 2003, when millennials were also aged 23 and under, 4 in 10 said they had savings, and they were much farther off the UK average of 55%. So while the youngest generation at any given point is least likely to have savings, the floor has risen significantly between millennials and Gen Z. So what's driven this change? Clearly, there is a slightly more savings-driven mentality among today's youngest cohorts. But we have also seen the impact of policy. Private pensions are a good example. In the UK, the government implemented a policy of auto-enrolment 10 years ago. This meant that people starting new jobs were automatically enrolled into pension saving accounts unless they specifically opted out. This has significantly lifted pension holding among Gen X, Millennials, and Gen Z, but the youngest generation is set to benefit the most. In 2006, when Millennials were aged 26 and under, and before auto-enrolment, just 13% had a workplace or personal pension plan. Looking to 2022, when Gen Z are also 26 and under, 33% have a personal pension, an increase of 20 percentage points. This has impacts further up the age brackets too. Looking at 2008, when Gen X were in their 30s, 44% of this generation had a pension account. In 2022, when Millennials occupy the same niche, 2/3 have a personal pension. And Gen X have caught up. By 2022, 7 in 10 had a personal pension, a 35-point increase on the level immediately before auto-enrolment began. Yet perhaps the most interesting angle is how little we talk about Gen Z's financial prospects. By all accounts, they face as challenging a macroeconomic backdrop as Millennials did 15 years ago, yet no one is talking about how screwed they are. This is a reflection of how important narratives are around generations. The concept of the screwed millennial has entered public consciousness and even affects how this generation views itself. Gen Z appear to be getting off more lightly, and we are now more likely to talk about their liberal values and attitudes to work instead. But there will be big financial challenges for this generation, and if these come as a surprise, then businesses and the government may need to provide more help for them when their great expectations meet reality.